We are up and rolling. We are going live. Good afternoon, neighbors. It is great to see you here today. I am looking forward to getting back into the book of Colossians. We're still in chapter 1 here, and we're not going to quite finish the chapter today. As you can see, we are in verses 9 through 14, and that will be the extent of what we're going to look at this afternoon. And I wanted to kind of break this prayer down a little bit as we start to work our way past the introduction for this epistle. So I don't think we're going to be using resources as much today. We're just going to spend our time in the text itself and just kind of let that set with our souls. And if you remember, we talked a little bit about the purpose of Paul's letter to the Colossians, and one of the things that we did note from one of the commentary resources was I believe a fivefold purpose to the letter. There was specific things, 5 specific errors that Paul was addressing through this work as what became later known as Gnosticism really developed. We're kind of in a proto-Gnostic period right here with this, and I was trying to look to see where that information went. I'm trying to pull up my Word document on the fly here. So I think there was 5 things, and I wanted to just real quick hit those in the beginning of this video as we get going here. Just kind of keep those things in mind as we look at the prayer specifically, at these blessings that Paul is asking for. While that comes up, we're going to go ahead and we'll read the text. This is chapter 1, verse 9 through 14. And so from the day we heard, we have not ceased to pray for you, asking that you may be filled with the knowledge of His will in all spiritual wisdom and understanding, so as to walk in a manner worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to Him, bearing fruit in every good work and increasing in the knowledge of God, being strengthened with all power according to His glorious might, for all endurance and patience with joy, giving thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share in the inheritance of the saints in light. He has delivered us from the domain of darkness and transferred us to the kingdom of His beloved Son, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. So that is verse 9 through 14. And my document is now up, so I can reference that. So there were 5 errors or characteristics of protognosticism that that are addressed here in this letter. So one, the characteristics of Gnosticism became that it was Jewish, right? It was stressing the need for an observing of the Old Testament laws and ceremonies. So it was works based, and it was using. And that's the thing with some of these really lasting heresies or lasting false teachings, is it uses kernels of truth and it uses the same language that the Christian church would use, but then begins to change the meanings of those words, phrases, and ideas. I'm sure that if one were to look closely, you'd see examples of that both in religious circles today and even outside of that, maybe in politics or film, perhaps, or other areas where you're using ideas and the same words, but different contexts or different meanings behind those words. So you may actually be using the same language in a conversation, but you don't mean the same thing. So it was Jewish, and it was stressing the need for observing the need. Now remember that, catch that, the need for observing the laws and ceremonies, and that would be the Old Testament ceremonial law, circumcision and dietary and things like that. It was philosophical, laying emphasis on a deeper knowledge, gnosis, and that's where the word Gnostic comes from. You needed this secret knowledge. It involved the worship of angels as mediators to God, so it involves the worship of others of God to, praying to angels. We see that sometimes even now with like praying to the deceased as a mediator between you and the Lord. It was exclusivistic, stressing the special privilege and perfection of those select few who belonged to its philosophical elite. It was definitely tiered. There were tiers you could get into and not get into based on this elitism. It was also Christological, but the seminal Gnosticism denied the deity of Christ. Right? It was Christological in that it didn't deny the person of Jesus, but it denied his deity. It did not recognize Christ as God, maybe just as a man. I will. Thank you very much.
Because I want to send to Mr. Stuff.
Okay.
So the questions inside.
Oh, it's beautiful. You did a great job.
And I started my name.
Good job. We'll put that in the envelope for you before we go. Okay.
Yay.
So as we take those things in with us, right? And we look at what Paul is praying for here for the Colossian church. Yes, honey.
So we are all.
Okay. Put them in your bag. As we look at these things, right? So he has noted he has not ceased to pray. So he's praying continuously. I'm sure he did other things like eat, sleep, and travel and whatnot, and pray for others. But he's using this figure of speech, right? He did not cease to pray from the day we heard. We have not ceased to pray, and they're asking things. They're asking, that God would be pleased to do these things for the Colossian church, filled with the knowledge of His will in all spiritual wisdom and understanding. Now, this is important because as we see one of the foundations of this error was special knowledge. So Paul is praying that these people would be filled with the knowledge from God in spiritual wisdom and understanding to circumvent, these things, these errors and these deceptions that they're being pulled into, and walk in a manner worthy of the Lord. Now, this is definitely important. I think that this also, kind of undercuts the legalism of, following ceremonial law, where it's not about following the letter of the law so that you can be obedient. It's walking in a manner worthy of the Lord. It's living our lives in a way that glorifies and reflects Christ and what He's done for us. And Paul is praying for these things for this church. Walking in a manner of worthy of the Lord, fully pleasing to Him. And part of that is bearing good fruit in all your good works. And increasing in the knowledge of God. Now see here again, he's talking about, knowledge. He's talking about increasing in, in the doctrinal foundations of our faith, talking about increasing the knowledge of knowing God, of being in a relationship with God. These things, put us closer to the Lord, and it will cause us to be strengthened, right, with all power, according to His glorious might, for all endurance and patience with joy. Now, the power that we're getting, right, isn't the power to, do some kind of superhero stuff, or, it's not. We're not talking about miraculous power here. We're talking about power strengthened to endure patience with joy, for endurance and patience with joy. Right? We know that we will need lots of endurance and patience in this life, and to do so with joy is the power that you receive from the Lord through the Holy Spirit. Right? When we see these types of prayers being offered, He's not praying that they would perform some kind of insane miracle or do these great mighty deeds. He's praying for us to live our lives out in a way that is pleasing to the Lord and honors His name, and to do so with endurance and patience, and to do that with joy. Right, so don't miss that. And we're giving thanks to the Father who has qualified you. It is God who qualifies you, not man. Right? It is God who has qualified you to be in relationship with Him and to do these things, not some elite tiered system of religion that you attain by going up these different levels through the ranks and rituals of what would become Gnosticism. And we can also see those errors in many of man's religions. Right? It's God who qualifies you, not some paper or university even, or it is God who calls you into these things, and He calls you into sharing the inheritance of the saints in light. Right? He's calling us qualifying us to share in his kingdom, because that is the inheritance of the saints in light. And he has delivered us. He has delivered us, not that he is going to do this thing, or that maybe he will if you check off these certain boxes. It's already been done. The dominion of darkness has transferred us to the kingdom of his beloved Son. Right? That's that inheritance. He's qualified you to share the inheritance of the saints in light. Doing so, he has delivered us from the dominion of darkness, which we were once slaves to in our sin and a separation from God, as our natural state, as our default state, being separated from God. And as God has qualified us, as the Father has qualified us to share this inheritance, he delivers us, he takes us out of the dominion of darkness and transfers us into the kingdom of his beloved Son, in whom you have redemption and the forgiveness of sins. Now, Christian, let me just remind you, and each one of us, I think, needs to hear this. If we're not willing to admit our sin, then you're not willing to accept the forgiveness of Jesus Christ for your sins. If you're not willing to admit that you're a sinner, and if you're so busy redefining what sin is so that you can make gaps for behaviors and for lifestyles that go against what God has intended for your life, then you're denying the work of Christ in your heart. And that is very, very shaky ground. Our salvation does not depend on perfect doctrine, and our salvation does not depend on perfect actions. Our salvation depends on the good grace of the Lord changing our hearts. And as that process happens, as your heart continues to change, you should be further and further drawn away from the things that separate you from God. And you should feel a stronger disassociation with those things that separate you from God, while you're working to get those out of your heart and praying that God will help you to do that. There may be sin issues that you will always struggle with your whole life. And that's just part of being in the flesh. That's part of being alive today in this body. But when we deny that those things are sinful, and we get comfortable with them, and we make accommodations for them, is when the true danger comes in of denying the forgiveness of sins. Not a sin, right? We're not talking about that you have redemption because you were forgiven of one sin. It's sins. It's the whole basket, right? It's that whole state of being and separated from God. But we do have a basket of blessings here, right? So we have, Paul praying for the church, Paul praying for his people and his flocks and these churches that he's planted. He's praying that they will grow in the knowledge of God. They will grow closer and stronger with God in wisdom and understanding. He's praying that we will live a life that will reflect our saved state. He's praying that we would walk in a way that is worthy of the Lord, that we would be pleasing to God in these things, that we would bear fruit in good works and still increase in the knowledge of God. He prays that we would be strengthened with power, and this power is to endure and be patient with great joy. He's praying these things, he's offering these blessings to us so that we may give thanks to the Father who has qualified you to share the inheritance. And this inheritance is a deliverance from the dominion of darkness and a transference into the kingdom of the Son, in whom you have found redemption and forgiveness of sins. So, neighbors, we're going to go ahead and sign off here in just a second. Thank you so much for joining today. I hope that you've enjoyed this video. If you've been blessed, please like, share, comment below. If you're checking us out on YouTube, please smash that subscribe button. That really helps us out a lot. Thank you so much for your time today. Have a great, great afternoon.